there, my name's Larissa and I'm the founder of WormGuide Equine. Welcome to our virtual stand. WormGuide Equine is the home of Australia's first all-inclusive science-based worm control system and convenient eco-friendly collection kit. The WormGuide team and I help horse owners like you treat your horses right, because now more than ever, our horses, our pastures, our industry need horse owners to get familiar with scientific evidence-based deworming and to stop relying on traditional worm control tactics and put up a collective fight against the resistance crisis that threatens to wipe out our industry and our beloved horses. That's why fecal egg counting is so important. It must be included in your equine management for the health and well-being of your horse. Like it or not, horse worms are developing resistance to the deworming medications that we use to kill them, and old deworming habits combined with poor deworming methods continue to contribute to the crisis. That's why we developed this guy, our fecal worm egg count test kit, and a bunch of worm control solutions based on world-renowned parasitology research. Today, you'll see our easy-to-use kit in action. Everything you need for hygienic and easy sample collection is included. There's a priority paid mailer to make dropping off your biosecure samples a breeze. No need to worry about breaching Australia Post biosecurity laws here. Our system is compliant, and we have even included an eco-friendly pen. How many times have you been caught out needing a pen to label your samples? You'll also hear from Dr. Charlie L. Hage, our vet and Australian equine parasitology expert. He has some amazing tips for you. There's no hiding from the fact that we love to test poo, and lots of it, for a very good reason. If we don't put worm the right way at the top of our to-do lists, horses will be overwhelmed with resistant worms that cannot be killed. The more we worm, the more resistance we get, and the more horses will get sick and die of colic. No matter where you are in Australia, our kit and high-tech worm control system tells you if the horse worming products and programs that you use work or fail, identify the best deworming schedules and treatments for every horse, and alert you to resistance and emerging resistance on your property. No matter which of our services you use, your horse's manure is a goldmine of useful data that will help save you time, money, and effort. But our service doesn't stop with our kit and precision fluorescent imaging biotechnology. We can detect more eggs as well as the type of worm present at 4 eggs per gram than cheaper alternatives. Because if you don't select your wormer carefully, you can get it wrong. This either accelerates the resistance process or leaves your horse unprotected, or both. Even the cheapest worming product used over and over becomes the most expensive if it doesn't work. All WormGuide customers get a ready-to-go sanitary sample collection kit, a product guide outlining the many ways you can use our kit, photographic proof of the worm eggs and types or absence of eggs in every sample, easy-to-read results delivered to your inbox, a full colour "What do my results mean" guide to help you treat your horses right, and complimentary telehealth vet consultations to help you interpret your results. How you use your worm egg count results matters, so we are here with you every step of the way.
Hi, Charlie's my name. I've been a horse vet for quite a few years, maybe a few decades, and the longer I've been a vet, the more I realise the help you do for horses is not just seeing them and treating them, but spreading knowledge and the word about health issues that affect their welfare. And I've enjoyed teaching and being a practitioner, And I'd like to talk today a little bit about parasites in horses, or worms. And you might think, what's the big deal about worms? You know, they're tucked away, you never really see them, and we've got a treatment for them, so what's the big deal? Well, it is a big deal, and it's really important that you understand, because most times it's not an issue, but it's important that you understand what worms affect horses and the management of them. And the management is really important because you can monitor worms in horses, and the way you treat horses is really important, and it affects the availability of what drugs are around. So today, or in this presentation, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. So we'll start with Gust. He's a 22-year-old former racehorse. The sort of worms we worry about with Gust, he's getting a bit old, so his immunity is dropping a little bit. So when he was younger, he might have had a few roundworms, but as he got older, he would have got resistance to those. He's still resistant, likely, to roundworms, but there's those little, small and large redworms that are a big deal for Gust, and mainly the small redworms, they're called cyathostomes, and there's tapeworms, they can sometimes cause colic, pinworms, they can give him a itchy bum, and several other sorts of worms, bots that you probably are aware of. They're not really worms, but they're intestinal parasites. So they're the kind of things we're looking for when we're thinking about treating horses. So as a foal, I should say, Gus would have been treated regularly for roundworms, and as he got a bit older, that treatment he would have been focusing on redworms, and the sort of products you give are quite different on those redworms compared to roundworms and tapeworms. So we talked about there's a variety of worms that affect horses or infect horses, and we talked about how we manage those and whether we should treat all worms. And so some people just think, well, if we get a horse wormer paste and give them a paste every few months, that does the trick. And to be honest, it often does do the trick, but it's not really smart, because we've all heard of antibiotic resistance, that we don't really want to kill all worms in the horse, because we're never going to achieve that. We're never going to achieve that goal. There's always worms that when the horse has worms in its tummy, that the horse is going to pass worms in its poo, in its feces, and there are also some worms that are hiding in his walls of his gut. So we're never ever going to get all the worms around. Unfortunately, we're not going to get all the flies and mosquitoes either. But the point is, we need to manage it. And how are we going to manage it? Well, we need to manage it by being a bit smart. And in the old days, back in the 60s, even maybe almost before I was born, they had wormers that would control those large red strongyles, large red worms, and they were thought to be the menace. And the wormers now that we've got are pretty effective against those, but it's smaller strongyles that insist, and we need to think about things like tapeworms. So what we need to do is not just wham bam, thank you ma'am, treat every 2 months with a wormer that kills what we think is all the worms in the gut. We need to think holistically about all the worms in the environment and in the horse, and by minimizing treatment, or by only treating as is necessary, we're reducing the likelihood of resistance, which has become a real problem. I talked about roundworms in foals. The wormers we use in Gust likely now wouldn't be effective against roundworms in foals. And likewise, those small strongyles, a lot of the wormers we use are not very effective against those now, because they're hidden in the wall of the gut, and it's hard to find wormers that are effective. So we need to be smarter about how we're managing worms in horses, because they can, not always, but they can cause colic and they can cause problems. So if you care about horses and you care about the future, which we need to think about the environment, it's really important that we understand that. So we'll take a little bit of a break. This is Raz. I look after Raz and all his friends. He's a lovely racehorse, so he's a bit different to Gus. He's younger. He's just developed resistance to those roundworms I talked about, but issues like tapeworms, pinworms, and importantly, those little red worms, that Cyatha stones that might burrow into the wall of his gut. And not as important these days because of those wormers I've talked about that Raz would have had regularly, are those larger red worms. So with Raz, we're worried about things like tapeworm bots and those smaller red worms or strongyles. So part of me looking after Raz is making sure that he's in good condition. He's a racehorse, so we want to make sure he's fit, and I look after him. Part of my care for Raz is to make sure that his trainer and owner look after Raz and feed him properly, and part of that is managing his intestinal parasites. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we do that. He certainly gets a wormer occasionally. I'm just going to give him some treatment. But my point is saying that not only do I treat with necessary medication, but also monitor his overall health. And I monitor how many worm eggs Raz is producing. And Raz happens to be what we call a low shedder. He doesn't shed many eggs. Doesn't really mean that he hasn't got many parasites, but he's not contaminating the pasture. So when Gus comes and eats in a paddock that Raz has been, it's unlikely Gus is going to pick up a lot of eggs that Raz might have left behind. Thanks. Okay, so we've just changed the environment a little bit, and we've got Pastry. Pastry is, how old is Pastry? So Pastry is a 14-year-old pony that we monitor. Pastry and all her friends, Star, and there's Level over there, Jenna, and some of them shed a lot of worm eggs, and we don't see any of those roundworm eggs with these guys. They're all too old. We see strongyles, large and small, we can't tell the difference. Occasionally we might see tapeworms or other kind of eggs, but usually we're most worried about strongyles. So how do we do that? Well, Glenda's been part of a University of Melbourne project and we're able to monitor them, but not everyone's got University of Melbourne on side and down the road. So either people collect species and look for someone who's a reputable company or veterinary practice that can do fecal egg counts and provide you with information. And there are some companies such as WormGuide that provide you with really neat kits that are able to be posted in the mail. So a really neat and responsible way to collect feces. Or some people will just get these little specimen containers and scoop them up. As long as they're being careful with the way they handle it and posting it responsibly. So when we know we've got a lot of ponies and we're shedding a lot of eggs, what do we do? Well, the answer isn't just to keep on using lots of wormers. I think we showed you Gus before. He's 22 years old. He's probably had 4 wormers a year. I'm not saying anything about his owner, but he's had 4 wormers a year for 24 years. That's 100 wormers almost. And it's going to cost about $1,500 to $2,000. So you need to be a little bit careful and you can be smarter and doing some fecal testing, as well as things like strategies like picking up. So Glenda's got a lovely little system where she picks up the feces in this paddock and composts it. It's no good just spreading it, but compost it. And there are actual little motorised John Deeres or tractors that you can go around and suck the hoovers that hoover it up, whatever. It's just a really good idea when you've got a few horses around. And where's Larry the sheep? Can we just say hello to Larry the sheep? There's Larry. So having other species in there, like Glenda's got alpacas, sheep, they're a good idea to also hoover up the eggs and they don't get infected with horse feces. So I hope those tips help, but I guess I want to say don't be dependent on worming your horse with wormers. Be a smart horse owner and inquire what are the eggs, what's going on inside my horse and what's the most responsible way to treat it rather than just encouraging resistance and wasting money and treating with commercial wormers with no real guide to what you're dealing with. So I hope that helps, and as always, and we've learned it with this last couple of years, having a bit of knowledge about a disease and a problem really does help. So I'm encouraging you to learn more, ask questions more, and be a more responsible and loving horse owner. Thank you very much. So isn't it funny, we've got a horse property, but I'm delighted to see sheep and alpaca, ponies, all living together, because that's a strategy we can use to reduce contamination of pasture. The other one is spelling the pasture, so picking up the feces if you can, spelling it in really hot weather. If you spell a pasture for several months, then most of the worm eggs will die. So that's another tactic to use, to think about. So spelling, picking up feces, and hopefully doing it in times where the worm eggs are going to die if they're left on the pasture.
I always found worming the 6 to 8 week way a little worrying, as I had imagined it was similar to overuse an antibiotic. I didn't like worming too much, but I didn't know how to do it properly. I treat each horse as an individual, and the WormGuide Super Surveillance Test tells me exactly what each horse needs and makes it easy for me to do it. This horse in particular is a low egg shedder and needs worming twice a year only, in autumn and spring. I have another horse on the property that is a high egg shedder, so I'll be giving an extra treatment. Most of my horses are low egg shedders, which is fantastic. Also, the test tells you what type of worm, so you can select a wormer based on the results and season. When new horses come on the property, I check to make sure they don't carry resistant worms, because once you have resistant worms, they never go away, which is honestly very scary. I'm glad that WormGuide are bringing more awareness to us about worm control and making it easy to understand and do.
I'm always up for anything that makes life easy, and I learn about how worms affect horses at Pony Club, and I want to do my part to help my horses. I'm into WormGuide testing because the science tells me exactly what to do, and the cool pictures show me exactly what's going on inside Tony, and the results ebook tells me exactly what wormer to get. The Super Surveillance tells me when to worm, and I worm. Easy!
I was worming too much, and honestly I had no idea what I was doing. I work with horses, they're my life, I love them, I spend every day with them, and when I found out my mare had colic, it freaked me out. The vet said it was parasitic disease. I started reading up on it and it was pretty scary. I nearly lost her, the bill was ridiculous, and I assumed that my wormers were working, but they weren't. The gold standard test from WormGuide revealed that I had resistance on my property. Thank goodness I found out. And now I'm a WormGuide, we're both a WormGuide test and treat fanatics.